Hello everyone, welcome back to our UI5 learning series. From today onwards, we'll do all the developments. Yeah, I'm a bit excited. I hope you are too. So before we start, we need certain resource information that probably I'm just planning to create as a GitHub repository. So this is the one which I have created, and I'll be keep updating this repository, the different episodes that I'm planning. So the last episode I spoke about the basic fundamentals and certain introduction on the UI5 theory, those kind of things. So where I just use certain blog posts which I have mentioned here. Side by side, you can check my YouTube playlist as well. So you can go to my YouTube channel and you can check the different playlists. So the one which I'm talking about is this one. So if you just click on that, and probably you can just see the different content that so far I have uploaded. So I'll update all those GitHub repository and your YouTube playlist URL in the video description box for your quick reference. Now the ID installation part, there are plenty of IDs in the market, and probably we need to install one of them, and the most popular one is Visual Studio Code. I just want to add one more point, that never go for any biased opinion about using an ID. It's all about developer's preference. I would definitely recommend, if already some other IDs you guys are using, you can stick to that. No such opinion to use this ID itself. But yeah, you can check this out if you want. It's very popular and it's developers friendly. Now here is the visualstudio.microsoft.com. You can go there and you can just check the different options. For me, it's a Windows machine, so I just downloaded this version, and you can download the other installer based on your operating system. So I'm just using a local development, reason being like I prefer it, but it doesn't mean you can also do similar sort of whatever the things I'll do. You can also follow along with your IDs side by side. Business Application Studio, which SAP is offering as a cloud-based ID, you can go by that approach also. But in subsequent tutorials, I also use the Business Application Studio as well. So I believe that should balance the choice. So now let's head over to the installation part quickly. It's a pretty easy and simple thing. Only just want to call out, when you install, you'll come across this kind of a pop-up where you need to select certain checkboxes. You select all. The last one is most important because that helps you to set the environment variables, and you can access the Visual Studio Code from anywhere of your computer. So that's make sure you select this checkbox. Now we'll come back to this SAP UI5-Hana.21.com, this particular URL. I'll give that URL also in the description box. To click on this get started with UI5, I would prefer to follow along what SAP recommends as a learning path. We'll follow this learning path. Is well organized and definitely can enhance our proficiency and skills on this particular subject. So today, obviously, we'll start with the very basic, and this is the one called Quick Start. So side by side, what we can do, you can click on this Quick Start sample. So it will take you to this particular application. It will open. So just click on the first one, that is called Ready, which is the most simplest way. And this is just an application it's opening, and it has a Ready button. Clicking on that, we'll see a simple message called Hello World. So this is a very simple application, but worth understanding the different concepts that it attached to, certain file artifacts and project organization, how it's created all the different artifacts. So those is pretty much important to start with, because those information and knowledge will help us to build our subsequent applications. Click on this kind of a button, code button, and it will show those kind of informations like index.html and kind of a web app index.js. So both comes under the web app kind of a folder, right? You can pretty well understand. So what we'll do, we'll just open our Visual Studio Code and just copy paste these codes, and we'll try to execute this application to see if it is working. We'll get into certain problem, and that is what we are learning. So stay tuned. So I've created a simple folder called Hello UI5 on my desktop. Let's double click on that. This is completely an empty folder, nothing is there. So now what we'll do, we'll just click on right click and open this called Open with Code. So if I click on that, so it's opening. One second, it's in my other monitor. So let's close this one. Okay, so this is the application, I mean Visual Studio application or ID, which has opened my Hello UI5 folder. Very simple. And you can open from here also, file, open folder, and from there also you can access. Cool. So next would be click on Ready once again, click on this page. Now this is the first point, which is an index.html, because all the web developments as a convention, there should be an entry point, right? So what we'll do, we'll just create a folder first called web app. Okay. And under this folder, we'll create a file called index.html. Okay. Now this is the file which is our entry point. So go back to SAP and copy this enter code, and let's see what are the things that it talks about. Okay. So now this is something called an HTML template, and it has two sections, kind of a header section and a body section. So what happens, like when this file will be loaded, that header part will be first loaded, and that the place where we'll attach all the scriptings. And in our case, this script is containing a certain piece of code which are called the bootstrapping. So bootstrapping is nothing, when the application gets loaded, as we spoke about the last time, that SAP has created the SAP UI5 tooling as a library or certain core functionalities which will help to run the application and manage the different life cycles of the context of the program or the application. So we need that information over here. So you see, the ID can be anything, but we have given it the bootstrap. Source is the area or the kind of a element which will contain the source code of the SAP UI5 library. We'll come back to this point soon. Now this is the theming. As we said, this SAP had a different thought process to land up with this technology, and one of the important thing was this theming, that application should be themable. So we'll be using EP-3 as a default as per latest theming availability. Next is the library. So now this is specifically a library that this application is using, whichever we are trying to create now, hello world. And it's a M for mobility, or kind of a mobile specific, means the application should be responsive and it will be seamlessly working across different devices. This is very important thing, because this is the place which most of the cases we stuck in at the initial days. Make sure you understood. So this is called resource routes, means kind of a routing of my application. So currently this index.html is basically having a top folder called web app. So this ./ is nothing representing this web app, and quick start is nothing, kind of an alias which is web app. So this is something, a namespace which we will be using at various times. So make sure you understand this particular line carefully, right? Now this one called onInit means once the library is loaded and things are all fine to process with, then this particular event will be triggered, which is called initialization event. And there I'm calling it like, hey, this is a module which I want to call at that time when it is all loaded, a bootstrapping part is all done successfully, right? So this is what is the thing. Now unfortunately we have not done yet this particular thing. We'll shortly create it. Come back to this data SAP UI compact version is the versioning that is currently SAP is offering, which is the age version, means the latest version. If any specific version you need for your application, you have to just change this age to a specific UI5 version. But by default, we should be fine as of now. The last one is an async part, because the main web development gets much more performance wise, it's always responsive and working good if everything works as an asynchronous mode, but not in a synchronous fashion. So now this is all set. Two things are open, as this one is the source, because we don't know where this SAP UI core JS is available. And this part is also missing because we don't have anything called index, because this index is not a module. Currently this index.html is not a module, it's just an HTML file. So we need a index.js as a module, right? So what we can do, we can create another file called index.js. So this is a JavaScript file that we want to now create it. We'll just do the same thing. I'll go back to here and copy this one. Okay. Copy this one and put back here. We'll explain what we're copying and what we're trying to achieve. Now this is an SAP UI define kind of a function which will be called, and these are the array of certain path or certain elements or controls. So the first control is an SAP button, and the second one is message toast. What you can do, you can just go to API reference, and you can search for button, and you will see something called SAP M button. So if you click on that, you will see this particular path called SAP M button. This is the control sample, right? Or SAP M button, right? So this is what you can also refer. Its only difference is instead of a dot, it's just put a forward slash, right? Similarly, message stores, if you copy, this is also another control. You can just paste it over here. You see the message stores and comes under SAP M. So this particular library, this control you will find. Similar way, SAP /m/ message stores, which we are using in this our application as a dependency. So these are all the dependent information that I'm just putting under an array. Okay, and once it is this dependency is found, then we are just adding up a callback function, some sort of, right, and we are putting this value. So we can put anything. We can put button 1 also, message stores 1 also, perfectly fine, because based upon the sequence of this path, let me zoom it little. So based upon the sequence of this one, this will basically refer to, right? So obviously we need to change this one to message stores to 1 and button to button 1. So that's it. So my code is still fine, but obviously for the simplicity, we should follow what we are just using it, so that way we are in sync. And obviously now comes to a button part creation. So this is the constructor, right? Use strict is something a JavaScript specific syntax. It is nothing for UI5 specific. It is telling like whatever the variables will be using, it will be under the context. It will not be for, should be collide or conflict with the global namespace. Okay, means browser Windows namespace. Little bit confusing, maybe leave it for the time being. Just use strict. We'll come back to this maybe in subsequent tutorial. Perfectly fine. Now this particular piece of code is telling like, hey, I'm using a constructor, and this constructor I want to use this button as my control. So I want to create a new control now, and this button will have different properties. Let's say text and praise. So let's quickly go back and also open button once again, and you see if you click on this, you will find a lot of different tabs. Click on this properties, and you will see different properties availability. So we are using text, one of the property, and one action also we are using, right? So go for these events, and we have a press event. So these two we are using over here. So text property and action property. So you are saying like when it will be created, the button text would be ready, right? And or maybe we can put anything like click, right? That is also fine. And when I press this particular button, then this particular function will be called, and it will just use this message toast control to show the message, and show is a part of this or the method of this particular control, and it will just open hello world or display hello world, right? And once this particular button is created, once this element is actually HTML element I have created, I need to put that element or attach this element to my main HTML file, and I'll place it under content. So what is the content? Come back to index.html, and you see the body ID, I'm calling it content. So that means the button will be attached to the body section. So again, I'm repeating, when this is my entry point. When the file gets loaded, first the bootstrapping will happen. It will load all the libraries, all the core functionality, everything. And once in an asynchronous fashion, right, and all this thing is done, means library and everything done, then this on init will be triggered, and it will call that, hey, at this moment make sure you call this index file. So this index file is nothing but the index.js file, okay, not the index.html file. Fine. And once this module gets called, means it will call this index.js file, and first it will create a control using a JavaScript code. I'll create a button, and once the button is created, I'm just putting this button under HTML element called content, which is nothing but representing my body, because this is the ID of the body of my HTML page. Very simple and very easy, right? Now one thing I want to call out, whatever we are doing is not the best practice. Okay, whatever we are doing, maybe just to start up things, just to spin up the development, but in subsequent tutorials we will all organize all the artifacts, all the different patterns of development, which is called MVC pattern, model view controller. So those kind of things will come in the subsequent episode. So for the time being, it's all created using this fashion, but worth knowing what's happening behind the scene. So what next? Obviously, to test it. So first thing is, we whatever this file we created, we need to host into a server. Okay, because from the browser, when we'll just open a browser, right? From that browser, I need to make a call, a request to this index.html, right? Now that means we need a server under which these two files will be hosted, and it will make an XHR request, XML HTTP request, and that request through it will open the respective file, which is my index.html, right? So this is the file I'll try to open, and subsequently it will open all the dependent libraries and controls as we just seen. So what we can do to the best way for the timing is, for the timing I'll go open this extension part, and I would like to install a quick thing called live server. Okay, so this is the one I want. Just give me a moment. Yeah, so this is the first one called live server. Click on install. So it's a million downloads. So it's already done. So now what the thing is, if we now open my application folder, now I have a, let's close this out. Now I have an option called index.html, right click, and now this particular menu option arrived called open with live server. So click on that and it will open my local system. This is my local computer, local host and port, and this particular index.html page is basically make a request, XHR request. But unfortunately, I don't see anything over here. So you have to click on inspect, go to inspect. So now you can see, go back to this console and we'll see what's happening. It's saying that the server responded with the status of 404 not found because it is not able to find SAP UI core.js. Okay, SAP UI core.js means it says, I don't know where this SAP UI core does exist. I don't know, right? So that means we can store this file somewhere in a specific directory over here in this folder structure, right? Or there is a second option that we can search for this library, and this is nothing but a SAP UI5 library, which you can directly access from CDN. Now CDN is called content delivery network. Okay. Now what we'll do, we'll just use the SAP UI5 library, not OpenUI5. So let's check this out now. If you come back to this option called variant for bootstrapping from context delivery network, and you will see these two options. One is SAP UI5 and another is OpenUI5. And this is the particular CDN link. Let me zoom little. So this is the particular CDN link which we'll be using now for our development. So there are alternate routes, of course. So I'll just copy and paste it over here. Fine. And of course, we can have a choice to use OpenUI5 also, but I said, but we are basically creating SAP UI5, not OpenUI5. I explained what is the difference in my last episode. So you can check this out if you want. And so that's the reason I'm using this one. Okay, cool. So make sure you save it. So always try to click save all so that all respective dependent files are all saved. So what next? This live server has a benefit that it's automatically track the changes. The moment I saved it, all things worked fine. And now you see this loaded. And if you just restart it, I don't see any console error, but I can see the button now. Okay. So what next? Let's close it and click on, and we see hello world. Cool. Excellent. So the first exercise is done. So we can go for the next one if we just having some time. So let's go back once again. So the next step is the study section. So if you click on this, you will see now the same kind of a button, but if I click on that, again the hello app. But what is the difference? Let's quickly check this by clicking on the coding section, and we'll come back to this one. And currently it looks like there is index.html, index.js. Side by side, we have a more option now, and I can see two more files created, which is app controller and app view.xml. So let's first check. This is no change, right? Almost all same. But click on this web app index.js, but this time you see there is a different piece of code, and this is nothing but creating something, a view, XML view. So I'm copying this one, and let us replace our code back to this one. So go back our file system, open this module. Instead of this new button, let's comment this code and just see how SAP is doing. So they are creating now a new view, which is of type XML view. And it's a JSON part that is called certain properties, because all XML views, when I'm creating through a constructor, right, we need this certain properties to give, means view name is mandatory. And once this is done, so this is called basically a promise in JavaScript section, because this constructor will return a promise, means once this view creation is successful, everything done, then only this particular callback function will be triggered. This function will come afterwards once the view creation is successful. And what it will do, it will just attach this view similar way it did last time. It attached or placed a button onto the content, because only a single element attached to the content. But now the interesting fact is that it is attaching a complete view of type XML view into the body section of the HTML page. Same way, nothing different. So let's go back to the next page of our browser, and now we click on this more section, and now it says web app view. So this is a view, it's been created. So go there and under web app, create a file called app.view.xml. Here, one thing to call out, this XML view, other than XML view, there are 3 more views or more different types, like HTML views, JSON views, and JavaScript views. So there's 4 different types of views that UI5 you can use it. Recommendation is always to go by XML views. Why? Because XML, whatever we are putting it like this, is a static way we are adding things, right? We are creating different tags and elements and attributes, all things that statically we are placing it. So the system or the browser, when it is rendering to, the parsing of this XML page is much faster than if we do something dynamically, right? Because at the runtime only it has to define, not at the compilation time. So that's the reason always you should go for an XML view. You can use JavaScript views when you need certain things to be created dynamically. So again, I'm just emphasizing, because I have seen many people create only JavaScript views. Probably a confusion there. You always go for an XML views. If there is a requirement or some sort of complexities which you cannot statically define, at that time only go for a JavaScript views, right? So don't go for JavaScript by default. Okay, so this is what wanted to call out. Now different page sections that is mentioned. Last time it created a button element dynamically. As you can see in this index.js, we created a button element dynamically, but this time I'm statically putting the button and all sort of different class, means CSS class, types, praise, all those properties as you have seen from the SAP UI5 SDK. From there it's been just used. So there are certain CSS cascading style kits. So that will come back in a later phase, not immediately, but you probably understood the purpose of creating this view, and this view will be loaded from this module by this constructor. And when the view is loaded, loading is fine, this particular callback function, or promise rather, will ensure that file is attached to the main HTML body section. Now come back to this question called press event. You see there is a press event called onPress. So this is a function which is a part of this particular view. I just told probably that UI5 is using also the MVC pattern, right? The famous pattern called model view controller. So this is called the view. So obviously we need a controller, and the first section is the reference to the controller file, and this is something called the same thing quickstart.app. But what you have to do, what it means, like we have to create another file called app.controller.js. okay, so now we come back to this one and go to this controller page, copy this one and paste it. I know I'm doing a copy paste because I'm not creating any new application as such. I just want to walk through the different artifacts first so that you understand how the things are all interlinked. So later on, when we'll create our own, it should be easy to follow along. And we are attaching those 2 things now. One is a model view controller as a part of a controller page, kind of a reference dependencies. Side by side, the message stores as the control, which will show the message in a nice fancy way. Same pattern. So now this callback function, we just need to write our method name. So here one important thing is it's JavaScript, simple JavaScript being used, and here there is a concept called prototypal inheritance or class kind of a concept. So there is a syntax called extend for a class, so that this class can be extended with, and we are redefining the different functions. So controller is already SAP provided concepts. SAP, I'm just extending this concept, right, or method, and we are giving a new value or new kind of a content called overwriting this particular on press event with my own logic and own code, right? So that's the reason this extend comes, and I'm telling, hey, this is the what I'm going to extend, because this is the file, is the name of the file, and on press event we just show this message. Very simple, straightforward, right? So that's how this controller, this view knows, right? So this view knows who is my controller, right? It will look for quick start. As I said, quick start is nothing but web app, under which it will look for the file which is having a controller.js kind of an extension, and it will just attach that file as a controller. So now click on file and click on save all. So my things are all set. So now go back to our quick start and just restart. There is some problem. Let's see quickly what's the problem. That's what our motive. So you see reference error, XML view is not defined. Cool. What is the problem? Let's go back, go to our index.js. It says XML view is not defined because this XML view is not linked to any of our dependencies yet. So we have copied not correctly. So go back to index.js, and here you see this is the dependency which is missing. So copy this one and just simply put it back, because we don't need any more a button. So we can replace it with an XML view, put a comma because it's array, and XML view, copy it, and instead of button put it over here. We are done. So just save it, and my application should now work fine. So go back here, you see the button is available steady. And now let's reload it once again, so that we know that there is no console error. No console error. Now click on steady. Again, the hello app is appearing. Cool. Frequently, we'll also check different other things like resources. So you see the resource section is little important now, because you see this is web app and what are the files gets loaded, right? And side by side, if you click on this SAP HANA on demand.com, and you see there is a resource section created, and all the SAP created files and folders or everything is, which is the jQuery based I explained last time, it's all loaded. And this is loading from this particular file called index.html and from this particular URL, which is SAP UI5-Hands.com, right? Side by side, you see one more thing, and that is all the files get loaded, index app.controller and index.js, right? So you don't see a view over here, right? You just we can only see the controllers, right, modules, but not the XML views. So views are coming all the way in the element section. If you go to the element section, so this one, if you just click on with this button, if you select any button, it will take you that particular element, and you see whatever the things that dynamically we attach the button and all those things, right, that we attach in the XML view. You can see all those things, right? So this is the element section. We'll come back to this element section frequently in subsequent video. That's perfectly fine. Just wanted to walk you through the different part which we'll be using in subsequent episodes. Console, any sort of error happens, console will log it, and we can go for an inspect. I come back to this tab and we'll see what the problems there, and we have to fix the problem just now I did a couple of minutes back. So let's quickly check the debugging part, how it works. So right click and go for inspect, and inspect will open this Chrome debugger. Click on this source tab, and you'll see this kind of index.html which we created, the first one, right? Side by side the app controller, it's also opened. So what I wanted to mean, so go to this module called index.js, right? So why it is not appearing? Yeah, index.js. So let's put a breakpoint first here, and in the index.ht controller you can put a breakpoint over line number 8, or better to say line number 9, because it's a function start. So now let's reload this application, and you will see the first is, after this bootstrapping is done, so this promise start, then function triggered, and this one is getting loaded, right? So this create means XML view, whatever we have attached statically. Once I hit on that, there is multiple buttons, as you can see, right? Using that, kind of a resume. This is kind called a step over, step in, and then step out. So those all buttons we can use to keep on doing our debugging. So I can use this button also, and my rendering is complete. So now click on std button. Now it's the on press event triggered, and my control is coming back to this particular line number, and it will just give me a message called hello app. So this is one way, just a simple way to debug this simple application. And now coming back to the different resolution. So there's a button called toggle device toolbar. If you click on this button, you have a provision now to select the different dimensions. So you can select the different devices that you're interested, right? iPhone XR or iPhone 12 Pro, etc. Depending on that, the resolution and everything gets auto adjusted. If you want to toggle a little bit expand, I believe you will feel this kind of you'll see this button. So you click on that, it will toggle this display. So you can select iPad mini or iPad Pro, whatever, and that way you can change the devices. And to come out of the original state, you can click back to this event and it will come back to the desktop view. So that you can test your application in different devices that you want. Okay, kind of a simulation view. So I believe this discussion was helpful. It's very a simple way. I try to refer back the SAP help documentations and just walk you through, and subsequent tutorials will be more in detail. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and we'll connect shortly.